Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the John Campea podcast. I am, of course, your host, John Campea, and thank you for joining me on this glorious Wednesday. We got a whole bunch of stuff to talk about here today on the podcast. And the first thing I want to talk to is a little bit of house cleaning, okay? Just a little bit of house cleaning items here. So a while ago, I put up some posts on my social media and on my Tumblr blog, basically talking about and announcing what happened to the audio-only version of the podcast. But apparently a lot of people didn't see it, so I thought I should address it here. So for those of you who have followed the audio-only version of my podcast for some time, you'll notice that a number of weeks ago, I stopped updating that audio-only podcast feed. And I wanted to give you a quick explanation why. Although I did explain it on my social media and on my Tumblr post, but a lot of you guys didn't see it, so I want to explain it here about what happened to the audio-only version of the podcast. So what happened was, I never make any money off the audio version of the podcast. I mean, that was fine. When I was doing the podcast as a hobby, that was totally fine. But when I left my job to come and do the YouTube channel here full time and create all the videos that I create, one of the things that I realized was that I was probably going to have to stop the audio-only podcast for a couple of reasons. Number one, the audio-only podcast cost me money because I had to pay a hosting service to properly do it. And when you're putting up as many podcasts as I was, that can be a little bit pricey. Not super expensive, but a little bit pricey. But it was costing me money. It was also taking up my time to, render out audio-only versions, upload them, do all the meta stuff and things like that. Not a huge amount of time, but over a course of a month and doing like 30 of them, it adds up. So it was taking up my time. It was taking up some of my money. And on top of that, it was actually taking away from money that I was earning on YouTube, because primarily I want people to watch my podcast in the video version on YouTube because I actually generate revenue when people watch the videos on YouTube. I do not generate revenue when it's on the audio-only podcast part. So I started realizing that it was becoming irresponsible of me to continue to do just the audio-only podcast because it was actually counterproductive to what I was trying to do. Now, some people say, well, John, just get sponsors for your audio-only podcast. A lot easier said than done. I find with a lot of the sponsorship stuff with audio-only podcasts, you're either making $5 or $10 a month on it, or you have to have an incredibly large number of subscribers and a large number of audio-only podcast listeners to actually generate any revenue. And I didn't fit either one of those categories. So it really wasn't an option for me. So anyway, I decided I was going to stop it. But now, after that, a lot of my viewers convinced me to do a Patreon page where those of you guys who watch a lot of my content and have been asking to support my content, you guys can contribute to the content. And, over my Patreon page, you can either do a $2 a month support or $5 a month support or $15 a month support. But anyway, and I thought, well, since these people on my Patreon page are actually contributing to me being able to create this content, I should make the audio-only version available to them. So if you are somebody who's been wondering, where's the audio-only version of the podcast? It does exist, but it only exists for my Patreon supporters since they contribute to what I'm doing here. So if you're interested in that, check in the description of this video. You'll find a link to my Patreon page. And I put up every day's John Campea podcast there. And I also put up an audio-only version of the brand new show that I do weekly, Star Wars Talk Tuesdays. So all that's up there and available no matter what level you sign up to support me at, whether it's $2, $5, $15 a month or whatever, you can sign up there and support me. So anyway, I just want to address that because I've been getting a lot of people asking me about where's the audio-only podcast. The audio-only podcast is now an exclusive thing for people who contribute to my Patreon. So with all that out of the way, got a few things we're going to talk about today. I've picked out 6 questions that you guys have sent in to me. How do you send in a question to me? It's simple. Just email me anytime at thejohncampeapodcast@gmail.com. Send on in your questions. I pick out like 6, sometimes 7 a day, and I've got 6 picked out today. If you want to see what 6 those are, look in the description of this video and you can get a sneak peek at the 6 questions we've picked out. So with all of that out of the way, let's get started with question number 1. And question number 1 today comes to us from Percius Westbrooks, who writes, "Hey John, love the show. Thank you so much. My question is, could Venom take on the Spider-Man mantle in the Sony Spider-Verse if it is successfully commercially and financially? Well, thanks a lot for the question, Perseus. Now, he is, of course, talking about, just to get you caught up to speed here, Sony Pictures, who is, of course, they own the Spider-Man character, the movie rights to Spider-Man. Right now, Sony is working with Marvel in having their new Spider-Man, played by Tom Holland, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So it still belongs to Sony, but they have a deal where Spider-Man, they can make the Spider-Man movies, and he can exist in the MCU. Now, Sony has also announced that they are doing some other Spider-Man universe films on their own. They've got a Venom movie coming, and they've got a Silver Sable and Black Cat called Silver and Black movie coming. These are, of course, Spider-Man characters. So the question that Percius is asking is, hey, if the Venom movie works, could Venom just become Spider-Man and be Spider-Man in that Sony universe? The answer is no, at least to the best of my knowledge. And the reason the answer is no is this. There was a lot of back and forth going on recently between Kevin Feige, head of Marvel Productions, and Amy Pascal, who's the producer representing Sony on the Spider-Man issue. And there was a lot of confusion about, wait a minute, is Spider-Man existing in both? Are MCU characters going to pop up in the Sony universe? Are they going to cross over? What's going on? Blah, blah, blah. And they kind of sent out mixed messages, and then they finally sent out a message that both of them agreed on, that both Amy Pascal and Kevin Feige said, yes, this is the explanation. And the explanation is this, that Amy Pascal gave, and Kevin Feige said, yes, this is the perfect answer. And that answer was this, that this Sony universe is in the same world as the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, that does not mean, though, that they're going to be crossing over. I mean, Amy Pascal said, hey, you never know, you might see Peter Parker, Tom Holland, pop up in the Sony universe, but you're not going to see big crossovers at all. You're not going to see that. And the way that I best explain that, what they mean by that is, look at the MCU and the Netflix universe. Because the Netflix universe is technically in the same world as the MCU. They exist in the same world, but they don't share the universe. Like, you don't see Daredevil popping up in an MCU movie. You don't see Captain America popping up on Luke Cage. You're never going to see those cross over. They've made that pretty clear. So while they exist in the same world, you never see any interaction between them. You'll hear a vague reference to the incident once. You know, that's about it. So you're never going to see any crossover. And I think that example is a perfect example, illustration of how I believe this Sony universe and the MC universe are going to exist. They're in the same world, but you're really not going to have a lot of references or a lot of crossover or anything like that between the two. So yeah, they exist in the same world, but that would mean that in this world that Venom is in, there is a Spider-Man. You may not see him in the movies or anything like that, but a Spider-Man, Tom Holland Spider-Man, does exist in that world. Now, they may completely change direction by the time this movie comes out, but that's my best understanding. And since a Spider-Man already exists in that world, then no, Venom does not take on the mantle of Spider-Man, because in that world, a Spider-Man exists. Any more than Charlie Cox's Daredevil character can decide to change out of his devil red and wear red, white, and blue and call himself Captain America. Well, you can't, because even though there's no interconnection between the Netflix universe and the MCU, they are technically in the same world, and in that world, there's already a Captain America. So that's kind of the best way I know how to describe it. And if you would describe it, if you have a better analogy for it, jump into the comments section and let me know what you think. All right, let's move on to the next question. And the next question comes to us from Wayne Worme, who writes, my question is this. Out of the Fox movies coming out next year, which one do you think is facing the biggest challenge? Deadpool 2 in the heart of the summer blockbuster season? X-Men Dark Phoenix for trying to get the Phoenix story right? Or New Mutants for being the new kids on the block? Hey, thanks a lot. This is a great question. Each one of these properties are facing particular challenges and have a certain amount of pressure on them. I think you can't take pressure out of an expectation out of the equation here. And really, all three of them face some pretty significant challenges, expectations, and pressure. So you mentioned Deadpool 2. Hey, Deadpool 2 is not opening on that spunky, February release date like the first one did. It's going to face real stiff competition. And this time, It's going to have real expectations. Not a lot of people were expecting huge things from Deadpool, and all of a sudden became this mega blockbuster hit, and everybody watched and talked about blah, blah, blah. Now it's not the underdog anymore, and it's going up against some really stiff competition. Big pressure. X-Men Dark Phoenix. Big pressure. You're talking about the X-Men franchise, and I'm sorry, Apocalypse was a pretty weak installment. It was a pretty weak installment. I didn't hate X-Men Apocalypse, did not hate it. But it was a huge step down from X-Men Days of Future Past. Massive step down. And now they're going to try to rely even more on this new cast of kids. Huge pressure. Huge challenges that they're facing. Then we go on to New Mutants. And New Mutants, this is for a lot of people, this is like a Deadpool scenario. Most people have never heard of the New Mutants. People who read comic books have, but, they represent a tiny, tiny fragment of the overall movie-going audience. So, which one is facing the bigger pressure? Okay, this is how I see it, but you guys might have a totally different way of seeing it, which is totally valid. Here's the way I see it. I think the one facing the least amount of pressure and challenges is New Mutants, because there are no expectations, really. And it's not a property a lot of people recognize. Now, that's a challenge. But I think if New Mutants doesn't work, it's not the end of the day for Fox. It's not it's not the end of the world for Fox, I should say, if New Mutants doesn't work. They can put it out. It's a scrappy, ambitious project. And if they knock it out of the park, great. And if it doesn't work, okay, that wasn't one of our marquee franchises anyway. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. That's fine. They're rolling the dice. They're taking the risk. They're trying something different. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't work, okay, didn't work. So I would say the New Mutants is the least amount of pressure, expectation, and challenge. Although they are facing challenges. Being the unknown, that's a challenge. I would say the one facing the most difficult road ahead of it is probably X-Men Dark Phoenix. I think more so than Deadpool. I think Deadpool they're going to crush. I think they're absolutely going to crush with Deadpool. They got a lot of people on board with it. There's a lot of positive momentum. Yes, that does raise the expectations. Yes, that does raise the bar, and that does put them in a more difficult position releasing in a blockbuster season as opposed to a February. Absolutely. But I think Deadpool has so much going for it that I think X-Men Dark Phoenix faces the bigger challenge because, like I said, they're trying new cast. They're trying to build off of a not-so-successful X-Men Apocalypse film. They're trying to regroup and regather. So I would say out of the three films, the one facing the biggest challenges in terms of challenge, pressure, and expectations, I think is probably X-Men Dark Phoenix. They got the toughest road ahead of them, and I hope they pull it out of the bag. I hope they make it awesome. All right, but you guys may see it in a totally different way. Jump into the comments section and let me know your thoughts. All right, the next question today comes to us from Andy Whitaker, and Andy Whitaker writes, "Hey, John, love your videos." Thank you so much, Andy. I really appreciate that. "I've been watching you since the early AMC days. My question is concerning the interviews for Justice League. I'm curious as to which director will be doing the interviews once the film is coming out. Will it be Zack Snyder or Joss Whedon? They both seem to have contributed a lot to the film, so which one will do the interviews?" Great question. Loaded question. Even if you didn't mean it to be a loaded question. This is a really interesting situation because a lot of people have been asking the question, well, who's going to get director credit? Will it be Zack Snyder? Will it be Joss Whedon? Will they get co-director credit? Blah, 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 blah. Ultimately, just in case you guys didn't hear about this, Warner Brothers does not get to decide who gets director's credit. That's not a Warner Brothers decision. That decision, if there's any dispute, that decision lies exclusively with the Directors Guild of America. The Directors Guild of America has sole power to give director credit. Warner Brothers gets to say who our director is. They get to hire the director. But if in a situation like this where there's multiple people directing and there's any kind of a dispute, then the final arbitrating board for who decides who gets director's credit is the Directors Guild of America. It's not Warner Brothers. So that's just a separate issue altogether. We've talked about that before. But you raise a great question here, Andy. You're asking, once the press tour starts and the junket starts, who's going to be there doing the interviews? I can only speculate. I might get myself in a little bit of hot water here, but I'm going to let you know this. I've now had a couple of people tell me that, and I don't think this will catch any of you by surprise. I think we see this coming. I've been told you're not going to see Zack Snyder direct another Warner Brothers DC film. I think you'll see Zack Snyder direct more Warner Brothers films. I think Warner Brothers and Zack Snyder have a good relationship. But from everything I'm hearing, and I don't know this to be fact. Let's be clear, but I don't know this to be fact. I'm just telling you what I've heard, and I'll let you evaluate yourself. You will not see Zack Snyder direct another DC film. That's off the board. I don't think you're not going to see him direct another one. And I believe that. I don't know it to be fact. I'm just saying this is what I've heard. And my opinion is I believe that. But I can't sit here and report to you it's official, Zack Snyder not directing any more Warner Brothers. I can't do that. That's not what I'm doing here. I'm simply telling you, I've heard from a couple of sources, this is the case. From everything I've seen and heard, I believe it. But I wouldn't put money on it, but we'll see. But I do believe that we have seen the last of Zack Snyder directing DC movies. And I'm okay with that. Even as a Zack Snyder fan, I'm okay with that. I usually don't like directors, even directors I love, staying on one franchise too long. I like directors to keep their creative energy sharp, you know? And that only happens when you do new creative things and you don't just sit on one franchise. Look what happened with Sam Raimi. He just sat on Spider-Man too long. I think he should have moved off of Spider-Man after Spider-Man 2. And I think Zack Snyder is a visionary director. I think Zack Snyder has grand visual storytelling skills. I would love to see him move off and do something else now, do something else creative with those gifts and those skills and that talent that he has. So I'd be okay with it if he doesn't direct another DC film. He's also directed Man of Steel, which I think is a masterpiece. So I'm totally cool if he does come back and do another DC film. But from what I understand, Zack Snyder will not be back to direct another DC film. If that is the case, and that's a huge if, okay? Big capital letters if. If that is the case, it would stand to reason that he probably won't participate in the press junkets. Now, again, I'm not saying he's not going to. We very well could see him pop up in the press tour. I'm saying, though, my feelings right now, from what I understand and the way I'm evaluating and kind of deducing the situation, which could be right or could be wrong, is that I don't think you're going to see Zack Snyder on the press junket. I don't think you're going to see Zack Snyder doing press or promotional tours for Justice League. And I think that's fine. I think it's fine if he does. I think it's fine if he doesn't. Either way, it doesn't really matter. But yeah, at this point, I would be surprised. Let's put it that way. I'm not putting money on it, but I would actually legitimately be surprised if Zack Snyder showed up on the press tour, because I think Zack Snyder is now done with the DC Cinematic Universe. But, you know, we will see how it plays out. So I think the person in the chair doing the interviews, even if they have him, because Joss Whedon's got some controversy going on, so maybe they don't want to have Joss Whedon come on the press tour. I don't know. But if we see any director on the press tour and in the press junkets, I got a feeling it's just going to be Joss Whedon. But let's see how it plays out. Could go either way. What do you think? You think we're going to see Zack Snyder? You think we're going to see Joss Whedon? Do you think we're going to see both? Do you think we're going to see neither? Jump into the comments section below and let me know your thoughts. And actually, you know what? That's a thought. If Zack Snyder isn't doing it, forget the Joss Whedon controversy. Maybe it just looks better then if for Warner Brothers, if they just don't have any director do it. Like if Zack's not doing it, maybe they just think, you know what? Let's take the pressure off. Let's not put ourselves in an awkward situation. Let's not have Joss do it either. Let's just have our talent, because we got Ben Affleck, we got Henry Cavill, we got Jason Momoa, we got loads of big stars. We'll just send them out on the press tour and let them do it. So yeah, I'm going to change my bet to neither Zack Snyder or Joss Whedon will be there. That'll be my guess. But maybe you have a different guess. Jump into the comment section and let me know what you think. All right, let's move on to the next question. The next question comes to us from Shawki Izzat, who writes, my question is there any potential for comedy movies that are live action with CGI characters, example Garfield, Scooby Doo, the Smurfs, to be critically successful? More than bad script, these movies usually flop because of the unpolished digital effects work on the lead characters. Thanks a lot for the question, Shawki. Completely 100% disagree with you on that, my brother. I completely disagree. Those films did not fail. That Garfield movie was not suddenly a great movie if the CG cat looked better. That wouldn't have transformed it from a bad movie to a good movie. The Smurfs movie is not magically transformed from a bad movie to a good movie if the digital Smurfs look. And I thought the Smurfs looked okay. I honestly thought, talking just visually here, I thought they did a really good job of maintaining the integrity of the classic look of the Smurfs while bringing them as a CG characters into a live action environment. I actually thought they did not a bad job. Scooby Doo. That movie does not go from being a bad film to being a good film if the dog just looked a little better. You ever see Roger Rabbit? Great movie. The visual effect, it looks terrible. It looks awful, but it's a great movie. Pete's Dragon, the original, was a great movie. Terrible. I mean, it did the visually, the animation over the live action does not hold up. It looks awful. Does not change it from being a great movie. No, I disagree with you. Not more than the script. It's all about the script. I mean, at the end of the day, great visual effects are very good. But look at like one of the most popular TV things going on right now, Rick and Morty. I finally started watching Rick and Morty yesterday. I watched 3 or 4 episodes yesterday. That show looks like shit. I mean, it does. It looks like shit. It's done so cheaply. They do that animation style on purpose, the lowest amount of effort needed, so they can spend the least amount of money. And guess what? People love that show. People love that show because the content, the script, the story, the characters, the dialogue is great and fun and funny. And if you do that right, like whether the CG character or the animated character looks spectacular or doesn't look so good, it doesn't change. It's certainly not more important than the script whatsoever. Because like I said, you take the most cutting edge Garfield CGI and replace the CGI Garfield they do in the movie and replace it with the most cutting edge CGI, it's still a sucky movie. The movie still sucks. Well, what's still there? The same script, the same story, the same dialogue, the same characters, the same thing. That's the problem. It's not those. So no, the problem with those examples you brought up isn't that the CGI wasn't great. That's not the underlying problem. Had the script been good and fun dialogue and all that kind of stuff, people wouldn't have cared how Garfield looked. We would have cared. We would have mentioned it, but we still would have liked the movie. And that's really the bottom line for me. So great. I mean, it's an interesting conversation. It's an interesting topic you bring up. I just got to say, I completely disagree with you on that. But that's the beautiful thing about films, man. It's all subjective. You have your opinion. I have mine. But tell me, the rest of you guys, what do you think? Do you think it would have changed our perception of films like Scooby Doo, the Smurfs, or Garfield if the CGI had just been better? Jump in the comment section. Let me know your thoughts. All right. We move on to the next question. And the next question today comes to us from Taylor Hardiman, who writes, he's talking about the Joker movie here, by the way. Don't you think it may be confusing for the general movie-going audience? How do you market this to casual fans who are oblivious to online movie news updates? Most will expect the same shared universe that features Jared Leto's Joker. This will not only be a different actor, but a different universe and a different origin story. Well, thanks a lot for the question, Taylor. For those of you who don't understand what Taylor's talking about, yesterday, big news dropped. Martin Scorsese, it looks like, because this came from Deadline. Deadline reports that Martin Scorsese is in talks, or might actually be past that stage, to produce a Joker standalone film. And Todd Phillips, the guy who directed War Dogs and The Hangover, he is directing the film and co-writing the film with another writer who also wrote The Fighter and wrote 8 Mile. So you got some good screenwriters, good director, one of the all-time greatest filmmakers in the history of film, Martin Scorsese, producing the film. Now, the idea behind it, for those of you who don't know about this yet, is that this is going to be a standalone Elseworld kind of movie. It's completely standalone. It's separate from the DCEU. It's going to have a different Joker. It's going to be set in a different era. It's going to be set in the early 80s. So Jared Leto's Joker would have been 10 years old. So it's a different Joker. It's not connected to the DCEU. What Warner Brothers is doing, I think, is genius. Absolute genius. Because one of the big limitations of cinematic universes, and I love I love the MCU, I love the DCEU, yeah, they're great. I love those movies. That's great. But one of the downfalls and drawbacks of these cinematic universes is creatively, your hands are tied because any story you want to tell now, any one-shot story you want to tell, well, make sure it ties in properly and is consistent with our cinematic universe. So creatively, their hands are tied. The idea to me that Warner Brothers is willing to explore some creative, standalone, outside of the DCEU one-shot movies, to me is as exciting as fuck. It's amazing. Like, remember, I believe the greatest graphic novel of all time, I believe, is The Dark Knight Returns. Guess what? That's not connected to the DC universe. That's a separate thing. That's a standalone Elseworlds kind of story. And it's the greatest one, in my opinion. It's the greatest one-shot one ever told. I think it's amazing. So the idea that Warner Brothers right now is willing to say, hey, you know what? We have such a vast, rich history of stories and characters. Let's free ourselves of forcing ourselves to make every single thing we do now have to fit in with our cinematic universe. Let's throw open the floodgates of creativity. Let's bring in some really talented filmmakers to just see what kind of stories they can tell, and don't force them to tie it into the DCEU. Let's see what they can do. That's amazing. That's amazing. Why? There's a bunch of people online I've seen giving backlash to this. I think you're nuts. I mean, all due respect, all film is subjective, and you're entitled to your opinion, and your opinion is every bit as valid as mine, okay? But you're loco. You're nuts. This is fantastic news. That they would take shots like this and give filmmakers some creative leeway to do whatever the hell they want. Just tell the best story you want to tell without forcing them to fit it into pre-existing narrative with the DCEU. That's great. So you can have your DCEU, and then you can have some wonderful one-shot standalone movies. And they're talking about how this Joker film is going to be a gritty, early 80s. It's going to be Taxi Driver, they said. Like gritty, hard edge, really grounded, dirty and dark crime movie with the Joker. That's awesome. That's completely awesome. And maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but I think it is so visionary of Warner Brothers to take a shot at this. I think this is just gutsy and bold and brave. And I hope that if they do it and it works, I hope Marvel's taking note too. And then Marvel might want to try. I doubt Marvel ever would, to be honest with you, because they are so locked into their MCU, but it would be really cool if they did. But anyway, one of the objections that I'm hearing most, and that Taylor is pointing out here, is people are going to get confused. People won't know what to do. They won't know what time to go to bed and what time to wake up. Do I have eggs for dinner or do I have cereal for lunch? I don't know what to do. I'm so confused. No. I swear to God, a bunch of people, and some good friends of mine, okay, some good friends of mine too have been tweeting this. So, and I gave them a hard time last night. So I'm going to give you a hard time too. This whole notion that, oh my God, there's one Joker here and there's a Joker there, and their brains are going to blow out of their ears. It's going to cause so much confusion, mass hysteria. People won't be able to comprehend the complexity of this. Come on. Guess what? The character Richard Nixon, the President Nixon, was in the movie Frost Nixon, and he was in X-Men Days of Future Past. Did people, wait a minute, but if that's Richard Nixon, how can that be Richard Nixon? I don't know what's going on. No, people were fine. They were able to wrap their heads around the idea. I was like, oh, this is a standalone story. It's its own piece of fiction. Okay, I get it. I mean, like, everybody was so concerned that, oh my God, Rogue One is going to cause mass confusion. People won't know that it's a prequel to Episode 4 and not coming after The Force Awakens, and people are going to think Jyn Erso is actually Rey. They just changed. Oh, it's going to be madness and chaos. Guess what? Yes, some people went, so wait a minute, does this come after The Force Awakens? No, it's a standalone story that takes place before Episode 4. This is a movie about the events that lead up to the original Star Wars movie. Oh, okay. People aren't idiots. Sometimes we can all act like idiots. But generally speaking, people know how to tie shoes. People are not morons. They can add 3 plus 2 equals 5. All right? People are not complete morons. Will there be a question? So wait a minute, is this the same Joker as the Joker from Suicide Squad? No. It's a standalone story. It's its own independent movie, taking a different look at the character in a different time frame. Oh, okay. People will get it. Okay? Did you see, when Rogue One came out, did you see people running around the streets going, I don't understand! I don't understand what's happening! No. They said, no, this isn't a sequel to The Force Awakens. It's actually a standalone story that takes place before Star Wars Episode 4 that leads up to the events of the original Star Wars. And then everybody went, oh, okay. People are not complete blithering morons. I'm sure. Will there be a moment where some people go, wait a minute, is this the same Joker as that? No, it's a different standalone story with a different representation of Joker. Okay. And people will get it. It's that simple. If people can do their taxes, all right? If people can figure out how to hook up their Blu-ray players, okay? If people know how to subscribe to Netflix, then people can understand and wrap their heads around, oh, this is a different Joker story. Yes, that's all there is to it. This whole thing I've been seeing on Twitter last night about that nobody's going to understand, people will be confused and faces will melt off like the Ark of the Covenant's being opened in front of them. No, it won't. People will get it. There'll be a little bit of momentary confusion. Wait a minute. Wait, I thought Jared Leto was Joker. Yeah, he is in that, but this is like a standalone separate story with a different character, with a different guy playing Joker. Okay, people won't understand. My mom gets it. And if my mom can get it, you can get it. And your idiot friends can get it. And my idiot friends can get it. And all of our idiot friends, even though they're idiot friends, they'll get it. They will get it. It'll just take one extra step of explanation. No, this isn't that Joker. This is a new one. And unless they're like 3-year-old children, they'll go, oh, okay, I get it. It's not that complex. It's not that difficult. I honestly do not know why so many people are like raising these huge red flags. The nations will fall apart out of pure chaos and confusion. No, it won't. No, it won't. There'll be a momentary thing. You'll explain it to them and it'll be fine. It's like, it's no more complex than the Rogue One issue was. And Rogue One ended up making a ton of money. People enjoyed the film. So just give it a chance. I mean, dear heavens, people, we're talking about one of the greatest filmmakers of all fucking time in Martin Scorsese jumping on board a DC property saying he wants to tell a story about one of the most beloved villains ever in comic book history. You should be doing a fucking jig. You should be doing dances in the street. This is amazing news. Amazing news. That some people are trying to cast shade and poo-poo and rain on this parade is completely beyond me. I cannot. One of the greatest filmmakers of all time is coming on board to produce a Joker gritty dark crime drama with the fucking Joker? Are you kidding me? This is great. I don't know why there aren't fireworks going off in the skies. Seriously, I don't get it. But again, it's all subjective. If you feel differently, your opinion is every bit as valid as mine. Jump into the comment section. Let me know what your rationale is, what your thought process is on this, and share it with the rest of us. Anyway, okay, that's my rant on that for the moment. Okay, let's move on now to the last question of the day. And the last question today comes to us from Joshua Ramirez. And Joshua Ramirez writes, hey, John, I love the show. Thank you so much, Joshua. I've been a follower since the AMC days. My question is, will you ever bring some of the guys from Collider to be occasional guests on your podcast? The chemistry you had with the Schmoes, Schnepp, Dennis was always great to watch. Also, where did the phrase bring on the filthy come from? Thanks and keep up the great work. Yeah, the bring on the filthy thing, I've had to explain that a couple times. I don't mind explaining it once every 3 or 4 months. So here's where bring on the filthy came from. And honestly, I don't say it enough because I should. I love that phrase. But what happened was a couple of years ago, I was doing a show and a question came in about 50 Shades of Grey was coming in, right? And the ratings and all that kind of stuff. And I was basically talking about how, hey, look, this thing, it's not like this movie is going to be the same as this movie. It's not like there's going to be like, you got to be careful about it because there's going to be a whole lot of filthy in that movie. And then I paused and said, now don't get me wrong. I love the filthy. Bring on the filthy. And I said that once. And it became like my unofficial catchphrase that I never said again. I mean, I might have mentioned it once or twice. I might have said it once or twice after that, but it became the thing. It caught on. It became bring on the filthy. I mean, that was it. And so pretty soon, like 80% of the emails that were coming in were, this is my question, blah, 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 blah. Thanks. And bring on the filthy. So yes, bring on the filthy is not a phrase, Bring on the filthy is a lifestyle, my friends. I live my life by bring on the filthy. Bring it on. I'm not going to lie. I'm not Boy Scout. I love the filthy. Bring on the filthy. I love it. I'm a huge fan of the filthy. But anyway, that's where the filthy thing came from. As far as will I have some of the guys from Collider, maybe eventually. It's the same reason why I'm not going to go on any Collider shows for a while. Like, I'm not going to go on Schmodown or Jedi Council or Movie Talk or anything like that for a while. I need some separation. Both visually separation to just understand. So everybody understands these are two different things now. I am no longer part of Collider. I left. And Collider is not a part of what I do. I'm my own independent thing. And I like doing my shows solo. I mean, yeah, I do my Game of Thrones thing with Ann and Corey just because I love, like, Ann and Corey and I get together and we watch Game of Thrones. So I love doing it with them. I think that's fun. I'll probably do my TV recap stuff. Corey might do some of the TV recap stuff with me too when I get into the TV recap stuff. And once all the shows start back up again, like I'm going to do Supernatural, Arrow, Flash, probably a couple of other shows that I'll talk about. If you have any suggestions for shows I should cover, jump into the comment section and let me know. But for the most part, I mean, look, I don't have a studio. I have a little home studio here, but it's not a proper studio. I don't have multiple cameras. I don't have 23 full-time employees like I used to have at Collider, where I can have 2 tech people behind the scenes operating camera switching and graphics and blah, blah, blah. It's just me. Everything you see on my shows, everything you see in my videos is me. I set up the equipment. I get in front of the camera. I do all the editing. I do all the graphics. I do everything. Okay. Collider, 23 full-time staff people. Me, just me, all by myself. So I don't really have the means of having like multiple people here with me with camera angles and shots and stuff like that. I just don't have the resources to do that. Not to mention, I do these shows during the day. The Collider people are at work. My Collider friends are at work at Collider. They can't leave work to come and do something else. They're at work. They need to be doing Collider stuff. So will eventually I have Christian pop on here or Dennis or Schnepp. Like Schnepp and I have talked about doing some stuff together. Yeah, eventually. But maybe not even until like 2018. Maybe not until the new year. But, you know, we'll see. We'll hold out hope. Anyway, guys, that will do it for me for this installment of the John Campea podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. Listen, I talked about Patreon supports at the beginning. If you'd like to become one of my Patreon supporters, that would be awesome. If you enjoy my 70 to 90 videos I put out every single month, look in the description of this video or look at this graphic right here for the link to my Patreon page to give you all the information you need. While you're here, do me a favor, click on the subscribe button, become a subscriber to my YouTube channel. Take this video, if you like this video or any of my other videos, make sure you share it around. Share it on your Facebook, share it on your Twitter. Get the word out about the John Campea YouTube channel, and make sure you're following me on Twitter, simply at John Campea. Anyway, guys, that'll do it for me. A bunch more videos coming out later today. Thanks for joining me, and until next time, bye-bye.